And what I remember from 8 years was that he was watching pornography on his cell phone. And she was sitting next to him, and that there was a day he duct taped them to these chairs. He had a gun, and he took this gun and told the kids that they had to watch as he raped them.
Welcome to Intrepid Storytelling, where the brave, the courageous, the dauntless, and the resolutely fearless share their journeys of hope, grit, and transformation. These are the voices of the valiant, those who dare to rise, to dream, and to tell their truth out loud. Because every story has the power to inspire, and yours just might change the world. I'm your host, Deanna Powell. Welcome to the Intrepid Storytelling Podcast. My name is Deanna Powell, and I want to welcome my very important guest today, Leila Culberson. She is the founder of the Sawyer Culberson Project, and we'll get more into that later. But before we start with our storytelling today, I want to give a trigger warning. There's going to be some sensitive topics, death, drugs, and grief. So probably, and some abuse in there as well. So if you have little children or any sensitive ears that won't want to be hearing these subjects, please make sure that you take precaution. And with that, thank you so much for coming today. This really means a lot to me. And I know that telling your story has been something that you've been wanting to do for a long time. And so I just want to make a safe space for you and a comfortable place for you to be able to tell your story in its entirety. And I know a lot of people will be inspired. Not only that, but also it will help save lives. So with that, why do you want to tell your story today?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for having me here today to give me this safe space to share my story. I will say that I want to share my story first and foremost to be a voice for kids that are going through abuse, or even adults that went through abuse as a child that don't feel like they have that voice to speak up and speak out and to share their own story. You know, I found just through word of mouth, sharing my own story with people along my journey, that it has given them, you know, a sense of healing and freedom to open up and share, maybe not publicly, but, you know, share individually with me. And, you know, there is definitely healing and power in that. So,
Yeah, I've had the same experience. You know, when you tell your story, you realize, oh, wow, there are other people that are needed to hear my story. So I'm just glad you're here to do it. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
So I grew up, born and raised in Washington. I feel like I've lived everywhere: Seattle, Renton, Marysville, Arlington, Lake Stevens, Everett. Anyhow, I grew up with my mom and my dad. So I have an older sister and an older brother. And then when I was very young, my parents went through a divorce. My dad ended up meeting another woman, and she already had a son. I want to say my stepbrother was about 2 years old when our parents met. Then they got married, and they had my younger sister. So there is 5 of us all together, and I'm right smack in the middle of everybody.
So how many siblings do you have then?
So 4.
4 total.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. What was that like?
Oh gosh, you know, there's never a dull moment.
Right? Did you have big Christmases and stuff like that?
Oh yes, yeah. Always.
Happy childhood.
Well, yes and no. You know, we went through a lot. I personally, you know, I don't remember a lot of the details, but I know that at some point in our journey, my biological mother, you know, my dad and her were fighting over custody and things like that of us kids. Mm-hmm. And eventually my mom thought that it was best to remove herself for, you know, the betterment of my brother and my sister and us. Anyhow, so personally, I didn't get to grow up with my biological mom. And as an adult, the day I turned 18, I believe it was, I was working at Burger King, and my manager came to me and said, "Your mom's on the phone." I'm thinking, my stepmom's calling, but it was my mother. We've had a little bit of a rocky relationship getting started again, but we have an amazing relationship now. And I'm just so thankful to have her back in my life. And she actually has been a huge support system to my kids and I. I'm just grateful to have that relationship with her again.
That's awesome. Do you feel like not having your mom in your life growing up, or at least for a period of time, did that affect sort of your outlook on the world at all? Or
I will say I don't currently have a relationship with my stepmom, but during my childhood years, my stepmom, I would say she was there for me during those years. So I didn't really feel like, of course I missed my biological mother, obviously, I think any child that grew up without their mom would have those, that's normal and natural. But, I am thankful that my stepmom was there during that time. Maybe I'll get into that later. Maybe I won't. But, I lost my dad almost 4 years ago now. And after he passed away, my stepmother has chosen to, well, even long before that, but for sure since then, close the door on our relationship. So
what were your young adult years like?
Let's see. Well,
some of your milestones, right?
I'm trying to think of where I want to get started. I will say, one thing that is important to me in my story and my journey is that, and again, I don't remember all the details and ages and all of that. As you gave the trigger warning about abuse and things like that, I was a victim of my oldest brother growing up. My sister and I both were. And looking back, again, we'll get into stuff that my children went through. But what I went through with my brother is nothing compared to what I will be sharing in a little bit here. As a child, it's always been my dream to grow up and get married and have my own kids. And I always wanted 4 kids, and I had 4 kids. But, I would venture to guess any mother would never want her children to go through anything like she went through. I wanted to do anything and everything to protect and shelter my kids and keep them safe. If I remember right, my brother was probably 8 or 9 when he was removed from our home.
And how old were you when he was 8 or 9?
This is where I should know better, but I don't. I want to say I was maybe 5.
5, okay.
4 or 5, something like that. Okay. I don't really know. That was a huge thing to have him removed from our home.
Did you know what he was doing? Did it feel did you know what he was doing was wrong? Or how did they find out? I guess the reason why I'm asking is because if anyone with children who can see warning signs, right?
Right.
Maybe from your perspective.
Yeah, and I will jump into that as I share more of my kids' story. But I would say I knew it didn't feel right. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
The things that he was doing to me. And then there was an instance where he did take things farther, and my stepmom caught him before anything had happened. And then when he was removed, he had done something to a cousin of mine, and I believe that her parents had reported it. Again, I don't remember all the details around that, but it was definitely obviously significant to have him removed from our home. And so anyways.
Yeah, it's good. I don't want to get into anything that's not your story, but it's good that he was removed.
Right.
There are stories that have been told where parents have, they kind of sweep it under the rug. So at least for that experience for you, saying this is not acceptable, and your parents were willing to do something about it.
Exactly.
Says something.
I think, yes. And I definitely agree with you that it has to be dealt with and it has to be addressed. You can't just ignore it and sweep it under the rug.
Right.
And he went on to be a repeat offender for, some time, and spent a good portion of his life locked up. So
that's tough.
It is tough. But moving on from that, so back to my
getting into your
young adult life.
Yeah. So as you moved through that experience and kind of, That's probably why you don't have a lot of memories. Yeah?
Right. I
Okay.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
They do say
Trauma
that
does that.
you block out trauma and things
Yeah.
like that as a way to protect yourself. Looking back, I've always been thankful for my dad and my stepmom. The one thing that they did make sure that they did do right, in my opinion, is they always made sure that we were at church. If the doors were open, we were there. We were at youth group. We were at every function. We went on missions trips and things like that. They
That's
always
cool.
made sure that we were active in the church.
Mhm.
I still have many, many of my church friends that are still in my circle of friends today and my circle of support. So I'm very thankful, extremely thankful for that. So then the day that I turned 18, my sister and I had a plan. We were both dating managers at Burger King, of all places. It's so funny to look back on now, how different our lives are. But anyhow, I was determined to move out the day that I turned 18, and I did. So I moved in with my boyfriend, and my sister said, of course, she was a year and a half older than me, and she would not, you know, make that move on her own. But she's like, if you're moving out, can I move in with you guys? And my sister and I grew up being, best friends, like I would think a lot of sisters do.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so we did. We moved in together, and until she got married to her Burger King manager husband.
That is so funny. That's so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Did you marry your Burger King boyfriend?
I sure did.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, my
I think we were
goodness.
together 4.5 years, married a total of 5.
Wow.
Yep. I had my first son 6 days before I turned 19.
Wow.
So
Young marriages, you and I relate there.
yeah.
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 And
So
of
young,
course,
so dumb.
yes. And you're
Just
that
making
young,
those
you think it's
young
going to last
decisions.
forever,
Yeah.
and you think you're in love. And, unfortunately, he ended up meeting a coworker's daughter at a Christmas party, and the
Oh,
rest
boy.
is history. He decided, that was the route he wanted to take, the path he wanted to take. And he said, see you later. And obviously there's more details around it than that, but that's about it. And
Would you consider that your first real heartbreak?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't
'Cause
really date
those
before that. So yeah.
big ones,
Yeah.
they do affect you,
Yeah.
because you get into a marriage thinking it's going to last forever.
Mhm.
And then when it doesn't, it's like your whole world changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it significantly affects you. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I know for me it was that way.
No. I get it. And, I knew that once he made that decision, going into marriage, you think it's going to last forever. And I remember having all these thoughts.
You
What's
think
everyone
they
going to
think it's
think?
going to last forever too?
Well, yeah. I was definitely
Oh.
embarrassed about what my friends and family were going to think and all of that stuff. But
I can so
yeah.
relate. Oh my gosh. Flashbacks.
Yep.
So what happened then after that?
Yeah. So we, went through our divorce. He exercised visitation rights with our son for a little while. And then unfortunately, it was his loss. He decided to move on and leave us behind. And I would say that we were better off for it.
So it was just you and then your son after that, just against the world.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Cool. And you didn't know you had it in you, but you did.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
find that out when you have no other choice but to figure it out.
Sink or swim. Yeah.
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 So where were you living at the time?
In Everett.
In Everett. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then it was the two of you.
Yeah.
What happens sort of like the big thing after that?
I was single for a couple years, I would say. And then I was at my stepbrother's daughter's birthday party. I want to say, I don't know, her 5th birthday or something like that. And my now ex-husband was at that same birthday party. I'd never met him before. My brother used to play in a band, and this guy used to manage his band. I guess. So I've been told. Anyhow, so that's when I met Corey. I'm just going to say his name and put it out there. I was there and I didn't really give him much of a thought. I was there for my niece and to celebrate her birthday. In fact, Corey and I didn't even really talk too much that night. I heard from my sister-in-law the next day that he was asking all kinds of questions about me. And of course, again, young and dumb. Anyhow, so we decided to all go to church the following Sunday together. And so I did, and we started talking then.
Would you consider yourself still young? And what age were you?
Am I still young, like right
No,
now?
no. When you at this phase,
I was gonna say
when
yes.
you met Corey, what age were you?
I was in my mid-20s.
Like 25-ish.
Mid to late 20s, something like that.
Okay. That's so funny because I met my second husband around that same time too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a lot. Our stories really. I just want you to know I relate to a lot of what your story is so far.
Okay.
So,
Corey began to share with me that he was in the Christian concert promoting world and things like that. And I just thought that was so cool. He could get us into all these different Christian concerts. To me, that was a big deal growing up at the church. And there were several Christian artists that I loved growing up. So just the fact that he had the capabilities of connecting us to things like that, I thought was so cool. Of course, he told me that he grew up in the church and that his parents were these amazing Christian people. I met them. I remember going to their house to meet them for the first time, and they just seemed like the sweetest people on the face of the earth, very kind, loving, welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Corey and I pretty much just hit it off from there. We were inseparable, got married a little while later, had our daughter not too much longer after that. I had my other 2 kids. So he and I had shared 3 kids together.
They're pretty close in age, aren't they?
Yeah, about
boom, boom,
2 years apart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a side story too. A little bit of it, but probably 10 years ago, I joined a weight loss program, and because I didn't lose the weight in between the babies, lost roughly 100 pounds. So that was awesome. So,
such an inspiring story all in itself, because I know a lot of people too that struggle with that. Yeah. And they watch you online and your journey through weight loss and sticking with your runs, and how even when you don't want to get out there and do it, you do it anyway. That inspires me too.
Wow. Thank you. I know we could spend all afternoon talking about that too.
Yeah.
But that I find that the running especially is super helpful with mental health.
So what were those early years like with Corey then and the babies?
So I'm very thankful that I was able to stay home with my babies. I mean, you have 3 little ones now, and you know how crazy and hectic life is, and you want to be there for every moment,
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful that I was able to do that. He ran mobile hot dog carts, and so I would help do the shopping and things for that and help with different events and whatnot. Let's see. And then at one point I started making cupcakes from home and selling those. That was fun. You remember that?
Yes. Yep. Your cupcakes were so good.
Every now and again I'd make a giant cake too. And, every once in a while we'd raffle them off or, do something fun with it. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. Who knows, maybe one day in the future I'll bake again, but we'll see. That was a fun period of life. Through my weight loss journey, I was actually friends with one of the ladies that was my coach. We had gone to church together and whatnot. Anyhow, and she's been an amazing support system for my kids and I as well. Just been a great friend to me. But she obviously saw my story and my journey as I'm, coming in to see her each week for my weekly progress reports and things like that and check in. And because I was so successful, she ended up bringing me on board to do part-time coaching, which was amazing. That was one of my very favorite jobs. I did that for several years.
And you were there in Mill Creek, right? At that
Mhm.
studio? Yeah, I
Yes.
remember.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
My girlfriend had owned it when I was a client, and then a friend of hers had bought it, and she kept me on as well. So yeah, I did that for several years, the weight loss coaching, and I did work into a full-time position there. So then eventually I did work more, so I wasn't as home quite as often with the kids. Well, let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
Through our marriage, in the beginning I thought things were great. And going back to, especially, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place right
It's
now,
okay.
being that it is the month of October, and I do want to mention, bring light to the fact that it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Yes.
Things for listeners out there that might hear this, you might think, oh my goodness, that's me. That's something that I'm going through or dealing with or facing right now. Things that I'll mention that I didn't know were red flags. Corey always had to know where I was at. He would always call, and I didn't realize this until I was outside of it, and girlfriends would bring it up to me. He would always call and make sure that I was where I said I was going to be, or he would come and show up, unannounced. And I was in La La Land thinking, none the wiser. Oh my gosh, he loves me so much, and he cares about me, and all this stuff.
Probably even having a job felt a little bit, did he just heighten up the control at
Oh,
that
yeah.
time
And he would
once you
tell
got
me
the job?
constantly, he would tell me, you're going to lose all this weight and then you're going to leave me. I mean, I can sit here and tell you the God's honest truth. That thought never once crossed my mind, ever. So, just to point that out, that those are definitely red flags when he was constantly doing that, again, and I didn't see it when I was living it and walking through it. But I will say that over the years, we were married 14 years, together 16, dated for about 2 years. His parents pretty much footed the bill for everything in our lives. His mom was his bookkeeper for his business, and she had access to his bank account. And in the beginning, him running the hot dog stands was fine when we had one kid, two kids. But then, when we're a household with four kids, then that's a whole different ball game. And, there's much more expenses that come along with that, family trips and things like that. And his parents funded it all,
Mm.
you know.
Were there any times when they said, nope, you got to do this on your own? Or
They might have said it, and then it takes one, his mom takes one look at our bank account. She's like, oh, you're almost in the negative, or oh, you are in the negative. Let me throw some money in there.
okay.
It was always like that. They would sit him down and have conversations. You need to, it's time to get a job, things like that. He never did, because he had dreams of, he wanted to open a brick and mortar hot dog place. Anyhow.
Was he still managing bands, or was
No.
that ever really a thing?
No. If it was, that was definitely before me. He never
Okay.
managed any bands when we were
Okay.
together, ever.
Okay.
Yeah. We did go to a concert here or there, and he would get us tickets to certain shows or whatever
So maybe
through
he just
connections that
said
he
that to
had.
impress you.
That's what I'm guessing.
Okay.
Yeah. More of a show than anything.
So was the hot dog stand all he ever really did, but he just
Yeah.
wanted a brick and mortar? Okay. Interesting. Your whole marriage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you got the job because you were recruited because of how much success you had, that was supplementing the income. Did he continue the hot dog stand on top of your income?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He did. He
Okay.
did. Yeah.
All right.
But, my kids would get to the point where, and of course they're little, kids are going to whine for things and whatnot. But anytime that they whine for something when we're at the store or whatever, he would always give in to them. Always. I would say that maybe wasn't true when I was around.
Mm.
So then the times that I would give in to them, or if the kids and I were out and I took them to McDonald's for a treat or something like that, then I was in the wrong, and I was in trouble, and I wasn't looking out for their health and things like that. But if it was his idea, then it's okay.
Oh, I see. I see.
So it would,
Okay.
be that manipulation and that guilt trip.
So, and probably money wise too,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Yeah.
was, you're giving them this kind of food, you're also spending money we don't have, that kind of thing. But when he did it was okay.
Right.
Okay. I
Exactly.
see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've experienced that.
So, that was a huge red flag for me at that point in our marriage, where I grew up where my dad, I'll never forget him telling me, you work hard in life, you work hard for what you have. And if you can't afford to pay for something after your bills are paid for, then you don't get it. Plain and simple. That's just the way that it is.
Mm.
If you don't have the money for something, you don't get it, or you work and save for it and then buy it. But he did not understand that concept. He did not have it because it's not what his parents taught him. And so I literally got tired of it. I imagine there are some women that would just love that, the financial aspect from his parents, but I just got tired of it. And I didn't want my kids to grow up thinking that that was normal, that you can just cry and at the drop of the hat, you get whatever you want because you throw a tantrum. It's not reality. That's not the way that life works. Um, and I didn't want to show that life to my kids any longer.
Do you want to talk a little bit about just your work and the pride that you had in your work before we get to
As the weight
your
loss coach?
Yeah.
Yes. I would love it when my clients would come in, like my longtime clients. In fact, I still have several of them that I'm still friends with today and still talk with. But it definitely was satisfying and fulfilling job to walk alongside them and celebrate with them in their journeys. And be able to post. We had a board in the clinic where we would post pounds lost and things like that. And when they would hit certain milestones, it was definitely exciting to celebrate that with them. And then we had brought in, the owner brought in red light therapy to the clinic. I don't know if you've ever experienced red light therapy.
I don't know why I've been ignoring it for so long, but I only just really discovered it. And now I'm obsessed.
Yes.
Obsessed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a facial that I got.
Okay.
And they used it. I'm like, oh, what is this? I'm like, is this going to burn my skin?
No.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All about it.
So, the owner of the clinic that I worked at, she trained, each of us in red light therapy and things like that. So we became certified red light therapy coaches, and we did all full body treatments. And I loved doing that as well. Super fun.
I feel like when you find something that, one, you're good at, and two, people benefit from your involvement in their life, and it almost, they're inspired by you and you're inspired by them, and then you start to feel like, I'm really proud of myself for doing this, and it's helping other people. Like, these are foundational blocks in our confidence and our self-worth that help lay that, when you got to dig deep for that strength, you take from those moments.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. And that was one of my favorite things, sitting in the private setting with my clients one-on-one, and being able to relate with each other and, share with them and what they're walking through, and relate that to eating and things like that, and being able to coach them around that. It was an amazing time for me and an amazing job. I really loved it.
So, are you ready to talk about the hard part?
Yeah.
Do you have anything spots that you want to kind of fill in before you start?
Yeah, I will say, prior to me making up my mind already to get a divorce, my baby sister, she had 2 children with an ex-boyfriend, and he was extremely abusive towards her. I will say that as well too. You hear stories about these women who make up all kinds of excuses for different bruises and things like that they have. I will say, my sister unfortunately has chosen not to continue a relationship with me at this point. I'm hoping that can be different in the future, but that's the way it is right now. But, at one point years ago, her ex-boyfriend put her in the hospital. She slipped and fell in the kitchen after mopping. Really, he had pushed her and ruptured her spleen, and she ended up in the ICU.
Oh my God.
So she survived that anyhow, and then she met another man, and this man had 2 children already from a previous relationship. Um, and unfortunately, these 2 boys, their mother passed away from an overdose.
Mm.
That girl's mother, so the boys' grandmother, her and I are friends anyhow. So I'll just say I'm so sorry for your loss. But anyhow, so then my sister, was a stepmother to these 2 boys, and she ended up marrying their father, and then they had 2 more kids together. Well, when her son was a week old, we all kind of found out that he was born with meth in his system. I had my suspicions on whether or not my sister was using drugs. Obviously, I confirmed it. Her and my stepmom teamed up and trying to convince everybody that she was using antihistamines during her pregnancy, and it showed up as meth. It doesn't work like that. So I will say, a small portion of our story, which is also a big portion, for a small period of time, I ended up taking in her week-old son and her daughter that was 2.5 at the time. And we actually fostered them for about a year. We were
Interesting.
moving forward with the adoption process and going through all that. That's when, I'll just say it, that's when, the shit hit the fan and things started to come out.
Oh, you had 2 little ones at home when that happened?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
All
right.
It's kind of a crazy story. So I had, my sister's 2 young ones living with us.
Okay.
And then Corey and I had moved into this home in Shoreline. We had been there a little while, and my brother's kids at that time, we would often have all the cousins over, and we would always hang out. Well, there was an instance between my youngest son and my nephew. They were about, I want to say 5 and 6 at the time, so little, where we were all going to get ready to go spend some time at the lake that day. Well, the boys couldn't wait any longer. They had to go put their swimsuits on. They were just ready to go. Anyhow, and so I later learned that, obviously I'll never know what happened in the bathroom between the 2 of them, but apparently there was some touching. I don't know. And so my nephew went home, told his parents, and they reported it to CPS. So in that, CPS came into our home and removed my sister's kids from our care, which, thank God, I will say that, and in light of the things that I learned following after that. So to this day, they are with family. So I'm thankful for that. My niece and nephew are. Knowing what I know that Corey was doing to my children, I 100% believe that he was hurting those children too.
Maybe that's where they learned it.
Could be, yes.
Could be.
Absolutely, very well. So then shortly after that, becoming a newly single mother, I am thankful that my niece and nephew were able to go to family, because there's no way I could have been able to afford to support all of us
It's a lot.
as a single mom.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was actually some months later that, as I was still doing weight loss coaching, at this point, Corey's parents had bought us the house that we were renting. We never paid rent. They had, I'll say it's important to know that, they own their own real estate company. Everything about them is kept so quiet and so private. I don't know much about the real estate side. But the fact that they own a real estate company and you can't Google a whole lot about them, that seems very odd to me. So I'll just put that out there. Anyhow, so they have their team of people that would come in and remodel this house before we had moved in. I remember the guy that came in and did the painting. His name was Mason. Why I remember that, I don't know, but I do. We're in this house. His parents own it. I've decided that I'm going to move forward with a divorce again, because I wanted to get my kids out of that situation. I didn't want them growing up thinking that they could get everything that they want handed to them. Again, like I said, there's many other things behind that. But and at
You or
that
Corey were
point,
having kind of lots of disagreements about that kind of thing. That was sort of your breaking
yes.
point with that.
Yes.
Okay,
So
I
in this
see.
house that we shared, he lived downstairs and I lived upstairs. And one of my now ex best friends lived in the house with us with her 2 kids. Kind of forgot about that. That's a big important piece too.
Mm.
So we lived separately in the house. Corey had there was a downstairs living room that was turned into the master bedroom, and then there was a room built off of that originally belonged to my youngest son. But then my girlfriend at the time moved in there with her 2 kids. So they're down there in that area with Corey. And my kids and I are upstairs. And the only time I would ever go downstairs was to go through the little hallway that I could avoid his room and go into the laundry room to do laundry or whatever. Of course, he had to come upstairs to the kitchen and the main living room and that whenever. But
Now, how old were you and the kids at this time?
My youngest was 7, and then my daughter was 9, and my other daughter, Sawyer, was 11 at the time.
Okay.
And then my oldest was already out on their own. And I will be respectful of that. My oldest now goes by she, her. So, from here on out, I'll refer to her as that. But so
What's her name?
Ash.
Ash. Okay. That's right.
So I have Cash and Ash now.
Ash and Cash. That's cool. I love it.
But we're living separately in the house. He's downstairs. My ex-friend and her 2 kids are downstairs. My kids and I are upstairs. And at that time, we're actively talking about getting a divorce. And I wanted to go back to school. So again, going backwards, when I was in high school, I was being homeschooled. My stepmom was homeschooling me. And I literally had like 2 more credits to go to finish high school. But the day I turned 18, she said, well, if you move out, I'm not going to finish homeschooling you.
Oh, shoot.
Well, whatever. So fast forward to we're in this phase. We're talking about a divorce. So I signed up for classes at Shoreline Community College, and I worked really hard towards
To finish
getting
your
my
GED. Oh, I remember you talking about
Yes.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what was going on. That's cool.
Yeah. And
I mean,
so,
again, I just think it's so great that you've always wanted to better yourself, even through some of these hardest times, that you're going through. You really do. You never lose sight of the goals that you want in life, and I commend that. And it's inspiring.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So going through that, some more red flags that I will talk about and bring up, looking back, the more independence I was gaining, the more income I had coming in. And I will say, pay attention to this, girls. I was stashing money away that he didn't know about, putting it into a savings account that he didn't know
Who
about.
gave you that advice, or did you just know to do it?
I'm sure I heard it somewhere, and I wish I could give credit where it's due, but I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes instinctually you just know something's going to happen and I'm going to need this.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Whether it be money you stash or record keeping of incidences happening, or some of those things are really important. That was one of the things I'm going to keep asking. What resources did you tap into to keep yourself, safe?
Yeah. And I would say at some point I did meet with a domestic violence, advocate. There we go. Yes. And, I remember hearing things like, have money stashed, have bags packed, so that way if you have to flee in the middle of the night or whatever, have a secret cell phone or, all these different things that are smart, if you have that gut feeling that things are going to go south or could get dangerous. Yeah. Yes.
Phone numbers.
Absolutely. Anyhow, so, he would block me in the house. He would make sure that I couldn't get out the door on time. He would stand between me and the door and not let me out.
Make you late.
All the
Stuff
time.
like that.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes. And then I'll never forget being at a family reunion at my mom's place with her and my stepdad. And, nobody knew he had, I'd gone to the bathroom and he had come into the bathroom with me and he locked me in the bathroom. And because he knew that I wanted a divorce and he just was begging me and hounding me, please don't do it. Please don't do it. And he locked me in there and wouldn't let me out, until I would say that I wouldn't or whatever.
Right.
And I don't remember caving to him. And eventually I did get out.
Sometimes you just say what you have to say
Right.
to get through that moment,
Yeah.
knowing
Yeah.
full well what you're saying coming out of your mouth is not true.
Yeah. But I just remember in that moment just being terrified, Yeah. And I will say, if I didn't leave at the point in time that I did, he didn't put his hands on me physically, but I do believe that would have happened sooner than later had I stayed. I believe that 100%. And given the next things that I'm going to say, I would have much rather he put his hands on me than done anything to my kids. I have many people that follow my story on Facebook as we sit here today. 8 years from when I left that marriage and that situation. It was October 18th, 2017, which is a Wednesday. I was on my way home from work, just wrapping up, locking up the clinic, and heading home. I worked in Mill Creek and I lived in Shoreline. Not a terrible drive, but still, I couldn't be there right away. It was not like I was around the corner. I just remember my youngest daughter calling me saying, "Mommy, I need you to come home right now. Something's happened and I need you to get home. You need to speed. It is an emergency." And she was talking quietly, but with a sense of urgency, So I was like, okay. I could tell that she didn't want to tell me what it was until I got there. So I didn't question her on the phone. So I assured her that I was hurrying, on my way home. So I get home, park the car. It's probably 8:30 at night on a Wednesday night. So it's a school night. Corey and the kids had been sitting on the couch watching TV or whatever. So Spencer calls me into the bathroom. She proceeds to lock the doorknob. She turns the fan on. She turns the faucets on and then tells me that she's very concerned that there's a microphone in the bathroom and cameras and that we're being recorded. So I'm thinking,
how old was she at the time?
She was 9 years old.
Okay.
9.
So she knew to turn the water on. And wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then that night, I haven't been super descriptive of as I've shared this on Facebook, but I'm not going to censor any of it here. We'll put our disclaimer out there. I'm just going to tell it like it is. So she just began to share with me, that as they were all sitting on the couch that evening, that Corey was watching what she described to me was basically pornography.
On the TV with the other kids there?
On his phone. Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what was playing on the TV,
Okay.
but if I understood her correctly, and what I remember from 8 years was that he was watching pornography on his cell phone.
Okay.
And she was sitting next to him and he was touching himself and groaning and making her feel uncomfortable. And, I don't recall how she got a hold of his phone or a phone or whatever to call me. But she did. And so these are the things that she's telling me. And then, of course, my son at that point wants in the bathroom because he, notices that I'm home now and he wants to be with me. And so, I just casually asked him, has anything ever happened to you? I don't even remember exactly what my words were, but I was like, has your dad ever touched you inappropriately or done anything inappropriate with you? And then he would tell me, that when they were showered together, and of course my son was 7, so it wasn't too abnormal. I don't think that, a son and father shower together. Maybe it is. But anyhow, he would tell me that Corey would make him press his butt cheek up against the shower door or so, just weird things like that. Not super alarming on a scale of what alarming would be, but still, it made him feel uncomfortable. So that's enough.
Yeah.
And at that point in time,
It's not normal.
okay.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very important that you say that too, because I think that people that
100%.
are listening need to be aware of these things. I've been listening to a lot of different TikToks and podcasts too, where I'm hearing young women share their stories and they're like, I don't know if this is normal or not normal.
That's not normal. That's not normal. And him expressing that to you was very brave.
Yes.
In my opinion.
Yes.
Children telling you the truth about something they probably feel scared to tell you.
100%. Yeah.
It's very brave.
Yeah.
And I want to commend them for that.
Yeah. I'll say every single year. I think last year we forgot because I don't know, business of life and whatever. It doesn't matter. Anyways, just about every single year on October 18th, I always take my kids out to dinner and I always sit down and express that to them, how grateful I am that they spoke up. So that is a part of my story. Even from then, I think that birthed my desire to start a nonprofit. My original desire was to be a voice for kids that don't have a voice, for kids that are silenced, which my children were silenced. And I'll get into that in a little bit here too. So in that moment, my children were all in counseling already. And so I just remember texting my daughter's counselor. I was like 911. I didn't know what else to do in that moment. I knew that Corey was getting anxious, knowing that something was going on. He knew that my daughter was upset and she wouldn't talk to him about what. And I just said, you know what? She's being bullied at school. She's really upset about the situation.
He was just there with the kids on the couch. He probably knew. He couldn't have not known.
He had to have known
that that's what she was talking about.
But in that moment, that's the first thing that came to mind. I said, she's being bullied at school. Yeah. So, she just needs a break. I said, I'm going to take the kids and we're going to go put gas in my truck. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I could come up with in that moment to get out of the house.
Smart.
So that way I could get a hold of their counselor. And so then I began to share with the counselor. She did respond right away. Good. And I was able to have a conversation with her. I said, this is what my children are telling me at the moment. So I took all three of them. I took Sawyer as well.
What had prompted you to put them in counseling so that they were already talking to someone?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yes. Yes, I do.
Was it the sort of the divorce that was about to happen or something else?
Again, my timeline is a little fuzzy.
I feel like that intuition of them needing to talk to somebody was really smart. Really smart.
Yes, I will say that I had another friend who had two boys, and we had gone to some play place or whatever, and her oldest son had done some inappropriate touching with Sawyer. And so I had taken Sawyer and put her in counseling for that. And then it was questionable whether or not he had done anything with my other daughter. Anyhow, I will say at one point when my oldest child did still live at home, they were probably about 12 years old, offended against my youngest daughter, who was about 2 at the time. So this is where it ties into my history and my thought process of what my older brother went through. And I knew, like I mentioned, he didn't have the right adults in his life, in my professional opinion, to get him the help that he needed at that point in time at 8, 9 years old. Again, my child was 12 and offended against his 2-year-old sister. And I'll get into why, which is very important in a little bit. But, I had just had my youngest and we had gone upstairs to take a nap. And you don't think, that your kids are, you don't think that this is going to happen. I remember getting up from my nap and coming downstairs and my daughter telling me this is what happened to me. And I knew that I couldn't sit on it and sweep it under the rug, like you said earlier. I knew that I had to do something. And so I did. I contacted my daughter's counselor that she was seeing at the time. And I will sit here and tell you, I've been through a lot of hard things, but to sit there and have to call CPS on your own child is one of the worst things to have to go through. And at that time, I'm thankful that I had family that was able to take in my oldest child at that time and allow him to stay here and there. He bounced around from friends and family and things like that for a good 6 months. I was very proactive in getting him into counseling and making sure that my youngest daughter was also in counseling. I will back up and say that the counselor that my kids were seeing met us at Providence Hospital up in Everett. And her and I we still talk to this day. But she walked me through all of that situation. In fact, I'll jump ahead just a little bit. She was, well, no, I won't yet. Anyhow, so just thinking back in my mind what my brother went through, I assumed that my child would be ordered into a sex offender treatment program. And so on my own, I sought out a sex offender treatment program for him to be a part of. Again, I could not afford it myself. And at the time, I just thought that it was amazing that Corey's parents funded the whole thing. I sought out an attorney because I did not want my 12-year-old to have this stick on his record for any reason, So we fought this in court, and thank God they never had to register as a sex offender or anything like that, and never has there ever been another situation. But going through that, I will say also, again, this was prior to us deciding on the divorce, but walking through that season of life, Corey always appeared and put himself out on social media that he was the perfect stepfather to my oldest. He would often take my oldest to these therapy appointments, and we were required to go to have parent groups and stuff like that. He would go a lot, and then he would tell me, not a lot of men would do this when their stepchild has offended against their daughter and things like that. So, again, that high and mighty attitude and how he's, you know, so good. Look at me. And I didn't think a lot about it at the time that his parents paid for the attorney and paid for the treatment. And I'll dive into that in a little bit too. But as a mom, I worked extremely hard, many sleepless nights, making sure that my oldest was where he needed to be or she needed to be, and making sure that my other children were where they needed to be. I could never have them in the vehicle at the same time. That gets hard. When certain kids have to be here and there and appointments, this, that, and the other. So I worked hard for a good 6 months, and then I put a camera system inside the home. So that way, when it was time, we could check all the boxes saying, I've done this, 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 the kids have done this, this, and this. All the counselors are saying, yes, okay, let's do reunification. It would be later down the road that I learned, I'll just jump ahead to this point. So I was still weight loss coaching. We were going through a divorce. My oldest had lived in California for a period of time. Well, they flew home to visit. And I remember sitting in my office as we were going to go have lunch together. And I just remember having the door shut and just having some heart-to-heart conversations with my child. And then that's when they began to tell me, Corey told me that he hated me so much. And Corey told me that if I did what I did to my sister, that I would be removed from your home and he would never have to deal with me again. And he promised me that if I did what I did, that he would never hurt my siblings again. So he offended against his sister, knowing that he was in the wrong, but in hopes that he was saving them. And obviously I had no idea at the time. And then it made sense in that moment. That's why Corey's parents paid for everything to keep him quiet. Because they knew. They paid for the attorney, they paid for the treatments, all of it, in hopes that he would shut up, because not one of them banked on the fact that I was going to rise above and I was going to fight like hell for both of my kids. Because I knew what my brother went through, and I'll be damned if that was going to happen to my kids.
I was going to ask if Ash experienced any of Corey's abuse.
Yeah. And so sitting in the office that day, I will be sensitive to this because Ash does not want to talk about it, is not ready to, and has verbalized that. But Ash told me, a few key pieces of her memory of things that Corey had done, and said, don't ever ask me about it again. Don't ever ask me to talk to anybody about it. If I can't talk to my own mother, then how in the world can I talk to a counselor? And they were very detailed and very graphic things. And when I moved out of that house, when I went back into the house, I collected every single last electronic, and going through some of the photos that I had found on there. I mean, not that I didn't believe my child, but there was definitely photos on there that,
just confirms.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Again, so going back to the 8 years ago on October 18th, 2017, that night when I contacted the counselor. Sorry, I get off track. That's so all that to say, my kids were in counseling for a lot of reasons. So the counselor said, well, based upon what your daughter told you and what your son told you, there's nothing immediately is going to happen, but you need to call CPS in the morning. So I said, okay. And she said, make sure that you stay in the room with your kids, go in there, shut the door, lock the door, whatever. Make sure that he is not alone with the kids. Done. I could do that. I had nowhere else to go that night. I'm sure I could have in the moment, it's fight or flight. I just wasn't thinking. So anyways, in that moment went back, slept in the girls' room where we slept. Anyways, and then the next morning, I got up I think when we came back, Corey was already in bed, so I didn't have to deal with him. So the next morning I got up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, as quietly and as quickly as I could. I rustled the kids awake, got them dressed, and I was like, let's get out of here. And I remember taking them to Denny's for breakfast. I just had to get them out of the house. And then, of course, here comes the text messages. Where are you guys? What's going on? The kids at school. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to spend time with them, take them to breakfast. We're just hanging out. We'll get them to school. And I believe I had that day off.
Had you ever taken them to breakfast
No.
in the morning? I'm sure he
Certainly
was
not
like,
at 5 a.m.
What the heck?
Right. So, and I'm just trying to think quick on my feet.
The morning after he's on the phone. And I wonder how regularly he had done that, or if that was the first time that he had done that, and then now weird is going on.
Yeah. So we went to breakfast, tried to enjoy our time together. I got them to school. And again, I had already made up my mind for a divorce. He and I had had several conversations around that. I used a paralegal the first time I went through a divorce. So I thought, well, I know that route. I know this person. I'll just go and talk to her. I shared all this stuff with Corey. He was made aware of it. And again, this is prior to October 18th. So I didn't know anything about the abuse when we had started talking about the divorce. So I had told him, we had decided that we were going to have a peaceful divorce and split the kids 50-50. And he thought, well, if we're splitting the kids 50-50, I don't owe you anything. You won't owe me anything. It's never the way it works, but I just said, okay. Anyhow, so then obviously when this information comes to light, that changes everything, and you're not going to have access to the kids any longer. That's just the way it is over my dead body. But so I contacted my paralegal. Why I contacted her first, I don't know, but I did. And I shared with her what the kids had told me. And she said, if I were you, I would not report this because you're going to look like a vindictive ex-wife to the judge when you
My
stand in
mind
court.
immediately went there. Yeah. But how can you not?
Right.
How can you not?
I couldn't even hear that. I could not even hear that.
Like, what do you do with that information but to report it?
That's the only thing in my mind that made sense. I had to.
Right.
My job,
as a mom, I
first
can relate
and foremost, is to protect my children.
Yeah.
And so I did. I got off the phone with her and I was like, forget that. And I feel like the phone call got passed around a few times before I finally, landed on somebody to tell what was going on fully. And again, if my memory serves me correctly, that's when, if it wasn't during that phone call, it was shortly after that, that I learned, again, another red flag that I did not, just didn't think to explore in the moment. But this is when.
Can we back up to
Yes.
exactly what you had to call CPS about?
I was calling CPS because my daughter was telling me that her father was watching pornography and touching himself.
Right. Okay.
In front of her.
Okay.
And then the fact that my son was telling me about the whole shower thing, which I knew was, it was just weird.
Okay.
And so that's when I learned that Sawyer's counselor was making reports to CPS saying that Sawyer was stating that Corey was choking her.
Okay, so the counselor was already making reports to CPS that you didn't even know about before you called yourself CPS to say what?
And what I would say for me, looking back now, Sawyer would tell me there was probably 3 different times that she would come to me and tell me, Daddy hates me. And I just thought, and this is before the divorce was in the picture or whatever, I just thought, why would you say that, Sawyer? Your dad doesn't hate you. Just kind of blew it off. And I didn't give her the chance to expand on that or explain why, I just kind of shut it down. And obviously I could sit here today and think, why didn't I, or I should have done this or whatever. But that you listen to other people hearing this, if your child says something off the wall like that sounds crazy, or like, why would you say that? Explore that option. Yeah. Take that time to have that heart to heart with your child.
I think listen. Of your story when I hear things from my kids. I really do. Yeah.
So we went to breakfast. The kids went to school. I called the paralegal. I called CPS. It was just a whirlwind of things. I was able to pick the kids up from school that day. The next day, the kids were having picture day. We had a nanny, basically a babysitter that would come watch the kids on Saturdays for me while I worked and Corey was working or whatever. I had called her and I said, look, this is what's happening. I said, I'm supposed to go to work tomorrow. Can you please meet me here at the house in the morning? I'm not going to leave until you get here. And just, don't say anything. Keep this between you and I. Can you please just be here so that way the kids are not home alone with him? And we'll just tell him that you're coming over to do their hair, to get them ready for picture day or whatever. Looking back now, I should have just taken the time off of work, but I didn't. for a few more days. Anyhow, so that was our plan. So I did. I waited till she got there the next morning, and then I went on to work. She kept things quiet. She was
Bless her heart.
super brave.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And I'll protect her identity. But
Because that would have been probably hard, especially
Yeah.
if Corey was coming to her saying, what's going on?
Yes.
I want to know everything. And
Well, Corey worked. He finally did get a job at Costco for a very,
Oh, I
very
remember
small
that.
time.
That's right.
But he worked with this gal's mother.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And that was another thing too. Speaking of the divorce process, he's like, just don't ever have me served at work. That would be so embarrassing. So the fact that I learned real quick that he and his parents lawyered up with a divorce lawyer and a criminal defense attorney. Like, why? Why?
Why would they need that?
A divorce attorney and a criminal defense attorney. And they filed through King County. We were still somewhat new to King County. The majority of our marriage was in Snohomish County, and I just wasn't thinking of the counties. And the paralegal I was going through was in Snohomish County. And really, you can file for divorce wherever. It doesn't matter which county.
Right.
But
so he filed at the same time you filed, but that were two different counties.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So at that time, like I said, I was stashing money away. I didn't have a large amount, 1,500, 1,700, somewhere in that ballpark. Well, again, prior to this coming out, I went and sought out a divorce attorney because I wanted to go through Snohomish County when I learned, because he did have me served at work, which was humiliating. He had a friend of his come. So
he asked you not to do it, but he did it to you.
Yes, nice. Yes. So I took every last penny of my savings and dumped it into this attorney. And then after the things came out with my kids, that Friday morning, I did get up, went to work. The nanny was there to get the kids to school. She messaged me every step of the way, so that way I knew that they were safely at school. That Friday, my brother-in-law was already coming to pick up my son because I had plans with my girls that night to go to Secret Keeper Girl. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. But anyways, the idea of it is good in and of itself, but I just don't like the whole name Secret Keeper Girl. I don't like secrets at all. Being what we've all been through, I don't like it.
For me, my little spidey senses go up going, I don't like that.
But at the time, they did some crazy hair tour or something like that. So the girls got into it and we had fun with it. But yes, looking back now, no. Anyhow, so I had already had plans for my brother-in-law once he got off work to pick up my son. My son was going to spend the night with him. My girls and I were going to go have a mommy-daughter date night. Anyhow, so I'm sitting at work now, Friday during the day, and all of a sudden, my caseworker from CPS, a lady calls, and I will put her name out there. Her name is Kate Broderick, and I would love to reconnect with her. So I'll just put that out there now. We hear all kinds of crazy, horrific stories when it comes to CPS, but she was a godsend. As far as caseworkers go, I could not have had a better one. She heard, obviously, our case and what my kids, the reports coming in and things like that. And she called me up and she said, I just want you to know, I'm going to each of your kids' schools. I'm going to pull them out of their class. I'm going to interview them, and then I'll be in touch. Okay. I later learned that Corey thought that was nuts, that I would let this stranger come in and interview my kids.
Oh, of course he would think. He would want to stop that at all costs, of course.
Right. And so she did. She went to their schools. I believe Sawyer was in middle school at that time, and the other two were in elementary school. Anyhow, so she did. She called me back. And the key takeaway from that conversation that stands out blaringly in my mind was that, I interviewed your kids, and based upon what they shared with me, you need to leave work immediately and you need to go file for an order of protection. And then you need to go home. You need to pack bags and you guys need to be out of that house this weekend or today.
Tonight.
And so I was like, done.
Wow. Wow.
She goes, if you cannot do this, I will take action with your children. I didn't skip a beat. I didn't ask her what she meant. I hung up that phone. I told my coworker, I was like, this is what I got to do. I'm out of here. I didn't care if I had a replacement. I didn't care. I got in my car, and my friend, she had a replacement coming in. She's like, I'm going to meet you at the courthouse. Thank God for good friends. So I did. I drove down to the Snohomish County Courthouse, and I learned real quick that you can't just show up and file for a protection order, whenever you feel like it. They have certain days, certain times, and that's that. So then I'm frantic. I can't get a hold of Kate. She's not answering her phone. So I'm leaving her voicemail, sending her text messages. Like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm sure I'm talking to my mom at that point. I was like, I don't know what to do. And finally, that's when I think it was then that she said, just pack bags and make sure that you guys are out of the house today. I need an address to where you're going to be at, yada, yada, yada. And so I was like, done. So I did. I rushed home.
And Corey was at work at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
I packed our bags.
Was that scary? Did you think, he could come home and what am I going to say? And
yeah. That was my biggest fear because
usually those days are scary, dangerous.
Yes.
Because you never know what he could do.
If he found out that these things were going on behind his back, my biggest fear was that if we were home and he was in the home and he knew.
Because he's pinned you.
Yep.
Tried to make you, right? He's choked out your daughter.
Yep.
He's done other things.
Yeah.
Like you just never, you hear about.
I was scared that he would say that they couldn't leave or that I couldn't take them from the home. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the warning. That's the warning to people that those are the most dangerous. So make sure you have a plan.
Yes.
You have your safe things ready just in case. You may never have to use it, but if you need it, those are the things.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
So I did that. Took my, I wanted to keep things as we had planned, so it wasn't so crazy for the kids. And
right, you're trying to shelter them from the panic part.
Yeah, that way Corey would see that, things were going through as planned. The only thing different was that my girls and I were going to go stay at my sister's for the weekend too.
Okay.
And so for whatever reason,
you're juggling a lot.
For whatever
up here.
Yeah. For whatever reason, he felt the need to tell the girls that he bought the tickets to this night and the special t-shirts and all this stuff. Why? That wouldn't even cross my mind. But I was upset because I remember I was proud that I worked hard for the money for those tickets. And I bought those tickets to take my girls on a date night.
Yeah.
But, just more manipulation with the kids because he wants them to choose him over me at the end of the day.
That and also probably trying to paint him as in a better light, considering the situation that you guys were all also in.
Yeah.
Just trying to make sure that they thought of something positive instead of,
Yeah.
Buying or selling real estate isn't just a transaction, it's personal. And that's why I like to treat my clients like their family. I'm Deanna Powell with the Intrepid Home Team at Realty One Group, Orca Gold in Bellevue, Washington. With over 25 years of experience in negotiations, mortgage, title, and escrow, I deliver a true VIP client experience on every transaction, whether it's residential, luxury homes, or land. I listen first, negotiate fiercely, and protect your best interest every step of the way. With offices and partners in all 50 U.S. states, plus 30 different countries and territories around the world, you can be confident that your real estate needs will be met in every and any area you make your move. If you want expertise, integrity, and results, call me today, Deanna Powell, with the Intrepid Home Team. because every move deserves VIP treatment. I can be reached on my mobile phone 425-777-6998 or email me at team@intrepidhometeam.com. Or you can visit my website www.intrepidhometeam.com. That's spelled INTREPIDHOMETEAM.com.
So again, I don't know why I got up Saturday and went to work, but I did. I think I was just, I don't know. I don't even know.
Something steady,
Yeah.
right? Or something consistent that you
Yeah.
could just go, okay, I'm still grounded here. At least with my job, I know that that's something steady, that's normal, that's regular.
Yeah.
Keep doing the regular thing.
So then I had to, again, think on my toes and keep Corey at a distance. And, we weren't originally going to stay there the whole weekend, but it's close to Halloween. So I was like, you know what? They want to go to the pumpkin patch or whatever, carve pumpkins, paint pumpkins. So that was easy.
Yeah. And you know what? And sometimes it's not just one step in front of the other, one day at a time. It's 1 hour at a time.
Yes.
1 minute at a time. You just keep putting one foot forward. Keep thinking, what's the right thing to do in this minute?
Right.
This minute. Yeah. Because you can't think beyond that.
Right.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So normally Saturdays, the nanny would watch the kids. So I wanted to kind of keep that. They look forward to hanging out with her. She's super fun and would always do, take the kids on fun outings and things like that and do fun things with them. So they were looking forward to their time with her. So they did. They still went and spent time with her. I reference this on my social media too as I'm recounting the stories. I remember, again, the days leading up to all this and weeks and things like that, before all this stuff came out, the kids were always counting backwards and making each other do weird things, random things. Nothing that I remember right now that was inappropriate, but it was just weird. Like, why are you guys doing that? Just, I don't know, like, knock it off. Stop. I don't know.
Like a 10,
kid thing.
9,
Yeah.
8, 7.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And then, the nanny would tell me about it. And again, I don't recall specifics of what the kids were saying to each other, but I did later learn in the days and weeks and months to follow, that came from Corey and that he would himself say, you better do this, whether it was something that he wanted the kids to do to him or he wanted them to do to each other or whoever else was involved, because he involved many people in his circle of abuse with my children. And he would count backwards from 10 and say, you better be doing this by the time I get to here, or there was some sort of punishment, inflicted.
Oh my gosh.
And I just thought, at the time, before I learned that, I just thought it was so odd. And then, then it makes sense, somewhat to some degree. That's where that stemmed from. Anyhow, so I will say that weekend, I can't even begin to remember everything that the kids said. But another thing that I want to highlight in my story is that, one thing that I feel like law enforcement faults the kids for is that they didn't share everything all at once. When, if you look at studies and statistics, children aren't going to spill everything all in one setting.
Right.
The more that they knew that we weren't going back, the farther away from that situation with him, the more comfortable they felt, the more they would share.
Safe, right? And what also comes to mind is memory. We already talked about this. Sometimes you don't remember because you block it out.
Yes.
And your body needs to do that to survive.
To cope, to survive. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's not fair to say that a child has to sit and just tell the whole story all at once. It's not fair.
Right. So sitting here 8 years later, sitting here today with you, it gets me heated and it makes me angry to know Even at one point, the detective said the kids' story is becoming grandiose. I don't care what it's becoming, when they are 7, 9, and 11 and saying all these things, and they say certain things, the same things separately to separate adults.
That's when you know they're not making it up.
Right.
Or they haven't been coached.
Right.
Right.
Now, so that weekend, we keep on track on this, and then I'll tell you about coaching. So that weekend, again, I don't recall everything, but that's when they started talking more. And I just remember my head swimming. I remember being at work that Saturday and my sisters firing off things to me that the kids were saying, the nannies telling me things, and I could not focus. I probably left early that day. Again, it's a blur. I don't remember, but that was my last day at work. And I just told my boss that I had to take an emergency leave. This is what's going on. I believe that was my last day at work. And with the Snohomish County court case, the King County court case, I had, like I said, spent all my savings to hire this attorney. Well, at the end of the day, he ended up coming to court that Monday to argue jurisdiction. But let me back up to that Sunday. I had spent the weekend at my sister's, and I just remember that Sunday, my kids and I believe my kids were with me, were at my mom's, and I remember being in her bedroom, laying on her floor, just a mess, thinking, Mom, these are all the things that the kids are telling me. I can't sit here and do nothing with it. My mom said, you better pick up the phone and you better call somebody, because if you don't, I will. This stuff has to be recorded. It has to be reported. And so I do. I remember calling the King County Police Department, and they put me on hold, and it was a Sunday. Whoever the head of the sexual assault unit was not on duty or in the office or whatever that day. And I know my memory is all over the place and I don't remember things correctly often, but for whatever reason, I recall that they had to reach him on his personal cell phone that day and patch him through to me so that I could begin to share all of this information, so that was really the start of it. And then Kate Broderick had already said, she was out of town for the weekend, but she was going to meet me at the King County Courthouse Monday morning to file for an order of protection. I don't remember if the kids were with me when I went to my mom's. For some reason, I must have driven them back to my sister's, and then maybe it was that my mom met me at the courthouse that Monday morning as well, because I remember her being there. And I want to say I left my kids at my sister's. So my mom and I went to the courthouse. Kate Broderick was there, and then Detective Myers from the King County Sexual Assault Unit. They all greeted me. And I just remember literally the only way I can describe myself is just being a hollow shell, learning all of these horrific things that my kids were going through, just beside myself, walking into that courtroom or courthouse. Just a surreal feeling. I think I even described it like out of body, like watching myself. I don't even know how to explain it. But, I'm and that attorney, thinking, I remember telling them I can't face this person in that courtroom. I cannot stand in that same courtroom with him. And I just remember praying to my, in my head, Lord, dear Lord God, please make a way so I do not have to stand in that courtroom with him. I cannot do it. And I remember them telling me, that's not an option. You have to go before the judge. And then Kate and the detective, my mom and I went, there's different floors for different things. We went to go speak to somebody about the protection order, and they gave me an advocate, I believe, to help. They can't fill out anything for you, but help, walk you through and explain it to you and whatnot. So I was able to write out in detail the things that the kids have shared with me. And it sounds silly, but again, I'll share on this in a little bit too. But I was able to put my cat and our family dog in that protection order as well. That was important to me to keep my animals for my children. We had both our cat Abby and our dog Margot since they were babies. And so
That's a good, I mean, when you're in the frame of mind that you were in, that to remember the animals,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I don't remember if somebody said, "Do you have animal?" Or I don't remember, but I'm so thankful for whatever sparked that. And I was able to put them in there.
I know it's a silly detail. You probably think, and maybe even the listeners think that that might be a silly detail, but I keep going back to the strength that you have in those moments. And I just think that you should be so incredibly proud of yourself for even remembering that part. That little detail is a huge deal, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you tell that part of your story because, you know,
Yeah.
that just says to me that you remembered that you were smart, that you were that instinct for you was there, you know? So anyway, keep going.
Thank you. No, and I think that's important. My kids deserve to have their animals as their comfort, especially going through everything that they were going through. First and foremost, they don't deserve to have their animals, their pets, our family members ripped
Right.
away from them.
Right.
So there's that. And then there's a bigger piece that I'll share in a little bit.
Right.
But anyhow, so again, walking through protection order, you fill out the paperwork, you submit it to the court, and then they give you a hearing. Like if we were there in the morning. So then I don't think we made it in time for the morning hearing. In fact, I know we didn't. But we made it in time to be one of the very first cases heard after lunch hour. So in the midst of all this and me filling this out, by the time I was done, we were able to meet back up with my attorney that I hired for that day. And he was able to stand in for me in that courtroom.
Oh, that's good.
So.
And you were just outside sitting on the bench.
Well, after we came back down from filing the protection order, I came back down.
Okay.
And I, again, shaking. I was trembling, terrified because I did not want to see him at all.
I've been there. I know what that feels like, and you're shaking.
Yeah.
And if you have to even see that person is very scary.
Yeah. So I just remember sitting on the bench there and my mom and the detective and Kate Broderick. And I'm sure the other attorney, just, kind of forming a shield around me almost. I remember his attorney came out first and she just was like, "I can't believe this. I can't believe you're making this step up." And then he comes out of the courtroom and he sees me sitting on that bench and he starts to come down the hall. And that's when, everybody gathered around me. And I just remember him throwing his hands in the air and he just shouts, "This is unbelievable." And that's the only thing I remember him saying. But, oh man. And then I believe he was messaging the kids even that morning because my kids were texting me and telling me or calling me and telling me or something. And I remember Kate grabbed my cell phone, I think it was. And I don't remember. He had left at this point, if I remember correctly. She called him or texted him or something and told him that he needed to stop and he was no longer to have any more communication with them or else, basically. And then I just remember my mom and I waited around. I don't recall if Kate did or not, but until we went that afternoon for the hearing. Whether or not the judge asked me questions, I don't recall now. I just know that he granted our emergency order of protection. And then it would be in that week to follow, of course, we were connected with the sexual assault unit at Harborview. I had to bring in all 3 kids for medical evaluations and to talk with them and forensic interviews and all of that, which is so scary.
Did that all happen sort of on the same day or within the
I
same
want to
week?
say within that same week for sure. And I will say that Sawyer was of the age where she could consent or decline a medical evaluation.
How old was she?
She was, let's see, so we had 7, 9, and 11. She was 11.
11 years old.
So she was able to decline. And I will put this out there. People always think, well, can't they tell through a medical evaluation if somebody was raped? When you hear about rape kits and things like that, or abuse involving children, I will say no. I will raise my voice loud on that. You hear time and time and time again that that area of the body heals the fastest, and you cannot always tell by a physical evaluation. So I'll just put that out there. Anyhow, so again, Sawyer refused it. The other 2 were young enough that they were not allowed to refuse it. And I was not allowed to be in the room with them, which as a parent, I mean, I get it, I understand it, but it's heartbreaking, you knowing that your child is terrified and that they've already been violated. And now these adults have to look at that area where they've already been violated.
Right.
Anyhow, so I will sit here today and say, there was nothing that came of that, if you will, as far as being able to tell if they were abused visually, but just by looking. So I don't know. I could go off on that and a whole nother thing, on whether that's necessary or not, I guess in some cases, but I'll just shut that door there. They did have their evaluations. That was that. And then I want to say shortly after that, we did have to go to the courthouse where they have a special floor unit, whatever, where they have their child forensic specialists come in, and they usually often will have a service dog to help the child feel more comfortable. Again, it's a setting where the child is in a room and the parent's not allowed to be in there. Again, I get it. But they did that with all 3 of my children. And my younger 2 would talk about some of the things that happened. And then Sawyer would talk about things that happened to the other kids. And she would talk about things that she had to do to Corey and the other people that he involved, and to her siblings. But at that point, Sawyer would not talk about anything specifically that happened to her.
At the time, was she ever able to tell you?
Yes.
Later on?
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and it wasn't too much longer later.
Okay.
But
in that particular interview, she wasn't.
Correct.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Shortly after that, I will never forget my youngest daughter. She is my one that never once, I'm not even kidding, never once had a bedwetting problem.
Mhm.
All my other kids did, which is fine. It can be normal, be, not always, but can be.
Right.
I will say this is not always true, but it can be true. And in my kids' case, it was. If bedwetting goes on for an extended period of time, that is a red flag.
Mhm. Or if they stop and then
Yes.
regress.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
But my youngest daughter, never once did I ever deal with that with her. And it still breaks my heart to share this story to this day. We would be in the grocery store, in the middle of the grocery store with my mom, with a friend, whoever. And my daughter would have zero warning whatsoever. And she would be herself. So that is a red flag.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I will sit here and say we saw specialist after specialist after specialist years and years before any of this ever came out when she was little, because she was constantly constipated. And I now can sit here and tell you I fully believe that was due to whatever abuse she was going through. I mean, to the point where I couldn't even take her out in public. And if she had to go to the bathroom, I would dread it because there's no way we're getting out of there before an hour. And I'm not kidding you.
Mm.
She would sit on the toilet for so long, and she would rip handfuls of hair out and she would eat it.
Mm.
So I say that for listeners, if they have a child going through something like that, it doesn't mean the worst case scenario, but just be aware.
Yeah.
Be aware.
Absolutely. And it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. But going back to her just wetting her pants, I mean, it was like it came out of nowhere. She had no idea at all. And that happened several times. Again, as the days progressed, they would share more and more. And then I learned that Sawyer would tell me that remember I told you I had a girlfriend that was living in the house with her 2 kids. Sawyer would later tell me that she walked downstairs one time and saw Corey and her having sex.
Mm.
And it was often that Corey would take all of the children to the YMCA. All the time he was taking them, and he would take this lady's kids too. And they were never allowed to go into individual changing rooms. They had to go into the family changing room. And I know for a fact that her kids are victims. My kids have told me very detailed things about things that happened in that family changing room. Her kids have been interviewed, and it's apparent to me that they have been threatened and told not to talk about it. To this day, the mother and Corey are still close. I don't know if close is fair, but there's still something there. I will say that. Anyhow, I know that I will say when I did return to my job as a weight loss coach, I had mutual friends, and I did learn that my ex-best friend's daughter, as a young teenager, had landed in the emergency room, overdosed. And again, I wasn't talking to her. I didn't know what she was walking through that time, but in my expert opinion, knowing, things that I know now, I would guess that she was masking pain that she's going through, or that she was going through, being made to hold on to these secrets. And I don't know. That's just my 2 cents on that. But, it was interesting that he was always taking the kids to the YMCA, and that they would always tell me that, he would never let them, like I said, go into the individual changing rooms. It always had to be the family changing rooms. And then my kids would tell me that there was a man living in the closet underneath our stairs. When we very first moved into that house, I'm very much a big kid, and I love playing hide and seek with my kids. Or we played it a lot back then, had the cousins over and would play hide and seek. So I knew all the hiding spots. Anyhow, again, at that point in time, we still shared the house, but we're separate. No, I had moved out. So this is like right when I took the kids and left. But I remember going back into that house. So when I got the protection order, even though his parents owned the house, they gave me rights to the house. I was appointed a court-appointed attorney at the time, and even my attorney was encouraging me to go with my kids and stay in that house for normalcy. And I was like, nah, not with all that they've been through. I can't do that. It wasn't me that went through what they went through, but I can't do that.
Right.
And I'm not going to subject the kids to going back to that and face those memories. Not going to happen.
Yeah. I remember you asking for new beds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Asking somebody for help to get new beds for the kids.
Yeah. But I had access to the house. So basically I could have stayed there if I wanted to. So that gave me the time to go through photos and paperwork and stuff like that I wanted and get my animals and gather the things that I wanted. And my oldest was actually homeless at the time. So them and their partner stayed in the house for a little while since I had the rights to it at that point in time. And Corey was restrained from going there. It's very interesting that after I got that protection order, I remember coming to that house to gather some stuff. Really, I was looking for my dog and my cat. And Corey was leaving as we were getting there. And I walked inside and my dog wasn't there. So he stole the dog. But all that to say, that's when I learned that there was some guy. My kids did not remember his name. They think that his name was Josh. But a bigger piece to that is that they were forced to call him Dad's sex sidekick.
What?
And then, they were very descriptive in tattoos that this guy had and 2 children that he had that were the same ages as my youngest 2. I just remember one day riding in the car and my son was crying, saying, "We need to save those 2 kids." The daughter's name was Taylor and the son's name was Matthew. And my son was crying, saying, "We need to save them. We need to get them out of that situation. They're doing terrible things to those kids. Why can't we just take them and adopt them?" So in the mind of a 7-year-old, you can't make that up.
No.
You cannot make that up.
No.
This is where I feel like I'm all over the place. So back to the dog. The dog was gone when we come back to the house. So I called 911, told them about our emergency order of protection. So Officer Carey of the Shoreline Police Department, I stay in touch with him even to this day, not often, but every now and again, I'll shoot him a text saying, "Thank you so much for being there for my kids and I. Thank you for getting our dog back for us." He did. He came that day. He made some calls. And I believe he stayed with me until my dog was returned. So Corey's sister-in-law brought the dog back. And again, I will never, never forget this day. Margot is her name. So the sister-in-law pulls up and Margot was just ridden with anxiety. And I never, ever have ever seen my dog ever behave this way. She was terrified. And my dog was a big lover. I don't know if you remember her or not, but she was just a big, sweet lover, pit bull, boxer, bulldog mix. Anyways, best dog in the world. Sweet lover. Her sides were literally sunken in. Her cheeks were sunken in. Her eyes were so dark. And literally, like you hear like a human wailing. That's what she sounded like. She was shaking so hard. She would not physically get out of the car. My ex-sister-in-law had to pick her up and set her outside of the car. And I remember after she left, I was like, "What the did you guys do to her? What did you feed her? What did you do?" I thought that they poisoned her. And she's like, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Traumatized.
So I load her up in the back of my Yukon. And she's just back there sulking and crying. And at this point, she's vomiting everywhere. Her bowels, she can't control them. So I remember it's getting late in the day. So I remember contacting a vet. I don't remember which vet it was, an emergency vet that was open 24/7. I want to say either in South Seattle or Renton, one of the 2 places we go to. Again, I have nothing to go on. It wasn't until later that I learned what happened to my dog. But at this point in time, I didn't know. So they're doing blood work. They're doing x-rays. They're like, "Well, she must have gotten into something. And, her tummy's just sick."
Did they do a rape kit?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean,
my mind just went there.
Yeah. It didn't cross my mind. I never thought that my dog was a victim of abuse. Never. I thought that they poisoned her. That's what I thought.
Yeah, right.
It did not. I could not fathom.
Right, because you don't normally, but as you're telling your story, my mind just went there.
Yeah.
So that's what happened?
it was, again, my timeline from is a blur on that point, but eventually the kids did tell me that that there was a day that Corey took the dining room table chairs and put 3 of them in a row, and he sat the 3 of them down, and he duct taped them to these chairs. And he had a gun, which I'll back up to that in a minute, but his parents had given him a gun, and he took this gun and he set it down and told the kids that they had to watch
Oh my God.
as he raped my dog.
Oh my God.
So that's what happened to her. And I remember the first time I walked through the door of that house after learning that story. You know, because obviously we lived there. That was our family home. And for whatever reason, I just had a visual of that. And I just remember I collapsed to the floor. I just laid there and just cried and cried and cried.
Did your kids tell you this story?
Yeah.
Was it Sawyer that told you about that? Or
I
was
want
it?
to say it was even my youngest.
Okay, Cash told you.
Yeah.
These things that they share with you, and they've shared with, police and counseling and caseworkers and stuff. I just have to say again how brave it is for them to tell you.
Yeah.
Especially after having been threatened with a gun.
I'll share that
Those
in a minute,
are
too.
scary things to share.
Yeah.
Embarrassing things to share. It takes, and I'm going to use the word intrepid because intrepid is not just brave. It's not just courageous. It's fearless. Like that is an intrepid thing to do, is to tell someone when you're that scared, embarrassed, or anything, traumatized. Sometimes you can't even remember.
Yeah.
Right? These things, your kids are a special kind of brave.
Yeah.
You don't make stuff like that up. When your kids tell you something like that, they're not making it up and they haven't been coached, Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Because I know that they can hear me.
I will go back to the, learning that he had a gun in his possession. We never had guns in our home. Never, ever, ever did we have guns in our home. And this was after their very first forensic interview. The gun didn't come up until days later, I would guess. And there was another time where we were at the house and Corey drove past or was leaving as we were getting there. And one of the kids reported that they saw a gun in the back of his Suburban. Doesn't take his genius to figure out that the kids can't see the trunk of his Suburban as he's driving by. Mm. But because he said that, the kids said that they saw a gun in the back of a Suburban. Obviously, at some point, they knew that he had that gun in the back of a Suburban. Mm-hmm. You and I can sit here today and know that he didn't see it as Corey was driving by. Mm-hmm. But if you're smart, mm-hmm.
Right.
Anyhow, it would be a little while later that I learned that there was a day that Corey took the kids and went to his parents' house. And the kids all told me that Richard and Sandra sat them down and told my children, you cannot tell on Daddy that we're giving him this gun because he doesn't have a permit for it. And if you tell anybody that he has a gun, he will go to jail. They said, we're giving it to him to protect you guys against your mom because she's an alcoholic and a drug addict. Okay. Now, I will tell you that prior to Corey and I getting together, He was a meth addict, and he would always tell everybody she saved my life, and I overdosed whatever before I met her, and then she saved me from that lifestyle. Looking back now, I would say the end of our time in that house together, I would venture to guess he was definitely using again. And he absolutely was hiding hard alcohol around the house. I would find it all the time. So, anyways, my children knew that, I'll enjoy some wine every now and again, but at that time I was not drinking at all, not even wine, nothing. So they knew that that was not true. But I will say, I don't know if it was that exact day, but either that day or shortly after, he brought them back home to our house. Again, I had to have been at work, and he lined the three of my children up on his bed. And in that bedroom, when we first moved in, it was like a bonus living room that we had turned into the master bedroom. I had two or three big bins filled with important paperwork, like we all do, that need to file away someday. Anyway, stacked up in the corner. So he said, the kids told me that this Josh guy was over, and that Corey and he moved these three bins away from the corner of the wall, and that Corey took this gun and shot a hole in the wall. And where that wall was on the outside of the house, it would have been underground, and it was concrete, if I remember correctly there. So he lined each one of the kids up on the bed, moved the bins, shot a hole in the wall to prove to them that this was a loaded gun. And then he went and held this gun to each one of their heads. So, again, that brings me back to children being silenced. Now that I know, even if my kids are not ready to speak out, I will speak out. And I will not be quiet. I will not protect Corey. I will not protect his parents. I will not protect any of the adults that were named in the abuse of my children. And I will be that voice until they are strong enough. And not that they're not, because they have been, but to share even more of their story, when they want to and when they're ready. Again, people say, how in the world can that be true? Why wasn't that discovered? Which I'll get to that in a minute. But the kids, furthermore, would tell me, remember, I told you his parents had a crew of people that came in and did some remodeling. And I remember the painter's name was Mason. I wish I remembered his last name. But my kids told me that Corey's parents hired Mason to come over and to repaint the brick. They had to sand it and repaint it, and my kids were made to get the vacuum cleaner out and vacuum up, the debris on the ground and all of that. And Mason repainted it in a way that, I remember a girlfriend of mine, her and I went back to the house after we heard the story, and we moved it. And, I don't know if it's our minds playing tricks on us or what, but we're like, we could kind of tell a little bit of a difference in the wall. But I feel like, when I reported that, to law enforcement and added that to our case, it was like straight out of the movies or watching a TV show. I remember pulling up outside of the house waiting to meet the SWAT team there. And I pulled up, and all of a sudden, like, I kid you not, 10 SWAT cars came flying around the corner, got out of the cars, guns drawn, and beat down the door and tore through that house. Even sitting here today, there's certain things that I didn't know about back then when it comes to sex toys. That I learned then. Again, maybe I'm naive. I learned real quick that there's sex toys that hook up to your cell phone and you can control the vibration. I had no idea that was a thing. He had this stupid swordfish that supposedly he caught that was hanging on our bedroom wall, or his bedroom wall. When I learned that this was something that was taking place, I learned that he was hiding it in the fish's mouth.
The sex toy?
At this time, my kids and I were staying with a girlfriend of mine, which again, I'm forever grateful for this friend. But we ended up living with her for a year. When these things were coming out and my daughter told me that, I remember her, or I don't remember if it was her or Sawyer. Sawyer, you? Okay. So Spencer, I'll just say it. Spencer and I and my girlfriend loaded up in my Suburban, or my Yukon, and we drove from Linwood to Shoreline, and we went through that house trying to comb through and find anything, and it wasn't there. I remember we took that stupid swordfish or whatever it was off the wall and just beat the crap out of it, hoping that it fallen inside, or who knows what. I was desperate for anything. But when the SWAT team went through the house, there was a medication that Corey had that he was prescribed called gabapentin. I can't stand that name. For me, that's a trigger. I know it's used for all kinds of things for people and animals. I can't stand that name.
It's like a muscle relaxer, right? Or something?
Don't even know.
Or is it anxiety medication?
I don't even know.
I don't even know either. I've heard it before. But.
Yeah. But, I learned that this was being inserted into my daughters. My kids would tell me about photos and photo shoots that they were made to be a part of. That they were made to, some of them they were made to smile, some of them they were made to look sad. They had to pose different ways. And they would tell me that Corey took them to some shop in the Mill Creek Town Center where he was able to hook his phone up to the printout and print these things out kind of privately.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What?
Mm-hmm. And so then when I was given my court-appointed attorney, I had to go sit down and go through my stack of papers that they had built on our case. And, my kids had told me about photos being taken and literally photo shoots and things like that. And of course I believed them, but the reality of it, or the gravity of it, didn't settle in until I'm sitting in this room alone, this big, huge office, waiting for the attorney to come in. And I think it was a fill-in attorney before my actual attorney was appointed. But, and I'm, slowly going through this, and all of a sudden I come across this photo of my youngest daughter. Again, it makes me so angry because lack of evidence. But it's, armpit level. You could see her armpit, from here up, and you could see soap bubbles on her. In the background was not any one of my bathrooms. It was clear that she was in a bathroom. It was not any one of my bathrooms, and it didn't ring a bell to any bathroom in his parents' home. That's another point where I just lost it, I did not know that photo existed. I didn't know it was there. But all that to say, when the SWAT team came through, they fully believed that since he was caught leaving the house on several occasions, that he went through and confiscated as much evidence as he could. But that one single photo, a Polaroid, had fallen behind the dresser and he didn't know it. There was women's clothes on his bed that did not belong to me, and they were like an adult woman. Now, again, this is part where I would agree with the officers or whatever, the detectives, saying that the case sounds grandiose. Again, I don't care what it sounds like. When I have 3 children telling me the same thing in separate scenarios, they would share with me that there was an espresso stand on Aurora Avenue. I think it's Fantastic is the name of the restaurant. There was a mobile bikini espresso stand. There's another one there now. But anyways, 8 years ago, there was this one, and if I remember correctly, it was Eye Candy Espresso. And the kids would tell me that Corey would load them up in the car and he would take them through the drive-thru of this bikini espresso stand, and that they were so embarrassed and so uncomfortable. And they went as far to tell me that, there was a day that Corey put on a bikini himself, right? And went through the drive-thru, and that the ladies that worked there told him that they felt so uncomfortable and they asked him not to come back, that this was just like creepy, especially with your kids in the car.
Right.
This is bizarre.
Right.
And when I learned about that, literally that day, I think it was, my mom and I got in the car and went down to that stand.
Mm-hmm.
The parking lot is empty.
Right.
I'm not kidding. So my mom and I was like, I'm going inside that restaurant and we're going to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. The owners happened to be there. And I said, what happened to the coffee cart? And they said, one day the owner came in, and this was a day or two before, I kid you not, and said she's going back to school. No warning, no nothing. Loaded up her cart and took off.
Tipped off, probably.
So my theory is that her parents, or excuse me, Corey's parents, knew about this and knew that they were uncomfortable and maybe they were going to say something and report Corey or whatever, and that they paid her off and she up and left, shut down and left. Probably she was freaked out. So I don't know. That's a person I would love to sit down and talk with today and find out. But anyways, I'm going to back up to Sawyer and how I know that Corey's parents were involved in the abuse.
Wow.
So if you remember, I told you that Sawyer refused her physical evaluation.
Right.
Again, I would say that this was in the timeline of 2 weeks span of when we left. We were at my parents', and I will never forget, I was up all night long with Sawyer. She couldn't sit, she couldn't stand, she couldn't lay. She was burning and she had to constantly pee. She was so uncomfortable. I mean, I thought it was my worst nightmare. I thought for sure she has an STD. Because then I'm learning about, different adults, and Corey's having sex with this other guy in front of my kids and his kids, and they're all doing stuff. Dear Lord God, And then they all had described to me a day at his parents' house where his parents went around and drew all the blinds, locked all the doors, so there was a bunch of adults in here. There was a cameraman, there was drugs, there was money being exchanged. My children were made to do things to people.
God.
And all of this stuff, to the point where I was at the grocery store one day with my kids, and my son thought he saw the cameraman, and my kids froze and were like, get us out of here right now. And we were in the checkout line. They're like, leave our stuff. We got to go now.
Oh my God.
So back to Sawyer. I couldn't get her into the sexual assault unit. So I took her to her doctor. Like, they were busy and couldn't see her. So I took her to her pediatrician. And her pediatrician didn't want to evaluate her because she didn't want to come in the way of the case. So she made a call to the sexual assault unit. So then they sent us to Harborview ER, where we were greeted with a social worker. And while we were sitting in the emergency room waiting for that social worker, my other children were at home with my girlfriend. And I just remember sitting in there crying, brokenhearted for all of my children, but right now for Sawyer, and saying, Sawyer, we all know that Corey did things to you and that other people did things to you. We know that. So now is your time to tell us what happened to you, so that way we can figure out what's going on with you. And it was in that moment that she started telling me the things that Corey was doing to her, and that these other adults and Corey's mom and dad. And I would later learn through counseling at the sexual assault center that my youngest was describing a game that he was made to play with the grandparents where everybody was naked and like pin the tail on a donkey type of thing.
How far past the October 18th was it that Sawyer then was able to actually say what happened to her?
This was in that 2-week time span,
Okay,
I want to say. So it was fairly soon that I learned this. But, it would be weeks and months that things more and more came out. Mm-hmm. But, and so that night she told me about Corey's parents doing things to her. And so I remember, hindsight's 20/20. I shouldn't have said anything to his parents, because then that alerted them that my kids told on them as well. And then they also went out and got defense attorneys too. But, I remember getting on the phone with my girlfriend and saying, oh my gosh, this is what Sawyer just told me. And so then she had Spencer in her room, and said, did your grandparents do anything? And then Spencer said exactly what Sawyer just said. And so Spencer went out and Cash came in and Cash said the same thing. And I remember she texted me, she's like, it's fucking true. I can't believe this. And then I don't even know.
And they're all saying it in separate times.
Yes.
Not prompted by you.
No.
At all.
No. And it was often, when we would be in the car all together driving, or, I'd have two of them in the car at a time or whatever. And I remember just days before Spencer came and told me on October 18th, Corey had picked Sawyer up one day from middle school. And I think that this is important too in our case, because Sawyer said that she got in the car and Corey had his dad on speakerphone, and she overheard them talking about gathering the kids' passports and how they wanted to take them out of the country.
Corey's parents said that?
And they always made sure that our passports, so we had them, and that they were up to date. So when she told me that, that was definitely one thing I went and found in the house, and I'm so thankful that he had not found them yet.
So only just to pause right here, because people listening to this story will say, so whatever happened to those photos? And, the doubters,
I'll tell you.
How do you corroborate a story like this?
Yes. And I guess I can't tell you for sure what happened, but I will tell you what I know to be true. When this came out, and another key piece to the story, when the gun was disclosed to law enforcement, and naturally they took that seriously, at that point in time. I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but I know my mom will. CPS literally placed my kids and I in hiding. It wasn't for very long, but they did, until they arrested Corey. They did go to his place of employment, which was Costco and Shoreline, and they did arrest him at his place of work. Now you ask about those photos. Kids told me that they were hidden in his Suburban. So while he was being arrested, because he was arrested inside of Costco and not in his truck, they didn't have a search warrant for his Suburban. So they couldn't touch his Suburban. So while he's being arrested and all of that mess, obviously his one phone call, or however that works, somebody tipped his parents off, and they took his Suburban and stashed it out on his brother's property in Snohomish. That much I know to be true.
So his Suburban wasn't even at Costco when they arrested him?
No, it was, but shortly after that, so they had somebody come and get it and take it so that it could not be searched.
So what are they doing with these photos? That's the other thing too. Like,
I will say, the day that my kids described that they were at his parents' house and all these adults were there, my kids told me descriptively that these photos were being sold. And I remember telling Detective
to the other people
Meyer
in
that,
the room.
Yes. And the detective said that's not how the exchanges are done this day and age.
No.
But I've heard that that's not always
the
true.
Dark web. Well, that's correct, of course. But they can be exchanged any old way.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. And getting a warrant for certain things, absolutely. I wonder if there's an investigation going on the dark web to find some of the things that could be exchanged there as well.
I will say, and probably, I'm trying to bring up every single thing that I remember my kids telling me. That is a lot of it. But at the end of the investigation, sitting down with Emily Peterson, who was the King County prosecuting attorney 8 years ago, and sitting down with Detective Chris Meyer, who was our sexual assault unit detective, they sat me down and they said, it's not that we don't believe your kids' testimonies. It's that we don't feel we have enough evidence to sit and, prove to a jury beyond reasonable doubt that these things happened. And furthermore, based upon, because I fought hard, it's unheard of that you get a second forensic interview, but the more the kids shared, I fought very hard for a second forensic interview for each one of them. And then they did disclose more things then, because it was a little bit further, They said, based upon everything that your kids have shared, we believe that Corey and his parents, Richard and Sandra, are involved in child sex trafficking. And then what they said next, it makes me so angry, but they said, unfortunately, it will take more victims before they are caught. And that, to me, I think that that's wrong on every level. Yeah. Here they have 3 children, really 4 with my oldest. And then, my ex-girlfriend's 2 kids. How many kids is enough? Right. How many?
Right. So you mentioned there's a part that is a really important part of your story that you don't want to leave out.
Yeah. So earlier you had mentioned the word coaching. And for me, that's an important word in my story. And one that I do want to take a few minutes to focus on. As I shared in the beginning, that I grew up a victim of my oldest brother. And again, the few memories that I have, not to compare, but I guess essentially that's what I'm doing. What I remember specifically my brother doing to me doesn't come close to what my children have been through. But I will say that, I told you my brother was removed from the home. And he did serve a lot of years on McNeil Island. And as soon as Corey divulged that information to his attorney absolutely took that information and ran with it. She went and dug up every single piece of information that she could on anything attached to my brother and, piled that into our case and tried to say that I took what I went through grossly under estimating, or whatever the right verbiage is around that, about what I went through. And I used that to coach my kids to share all of this.
Even though they were divulging things to you out of the blue.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so of course they're going to try to figure out how to fight their case. So you're really stuck in this situation. You're really stuck because the evidence is not sufficient enough to bring him to justice, them to justice. And yet you're still having to walk this path, and hopefully something happens where enough evidence does come to light.
Yeah. I will say, I'll touch on a couple other things, then we'll move on to the second portion of my, I don't know what's second, but the next portion of my journey. But throughout the entire process of the divorce and the family court and all of that, any time that Corey had to be, or was called in to be questioned, he would say, oh, I showed up. Oh, I was present for that. But he would never answer any questions. He would always plead the fifth. And I think that's a very important piece of information for people to know, Mm-hmm. He would always say, oh, I showed up to that. Oh, I met with the family court, whoever, facilitator or whoever it was.
Oh, yeah, I sat through that interview.
Yeah.
But I pled the fifth.
I showed up for the deposition, but I pled the fifth, Mm-hmm. So he never answered anything. And I think it's also interesting to say,
have they ever given him a polygraph test?
Yes. Yeah. I would like to see that. I would like to see that and see the questions that they asked and all that. And I bet
your kids would like to see that.
the legalities around that.
Nodding,
But
yes.
I will say,
Bless all of your hearts. You guys have a strength that so many of us will never know. And I just want to honor that and make it, known that I respect it so much. Your strength, your kids' strength, your family's strength. And like I was mentioning before, that you guys just have a whole community that will catch you when you're feeling like you're falling. Okay. Yeah. 100%.
no, I'll add in real quick, we had to go through mediation. And so I was in one room, he was in another room, and the mediator was going back and forth. Well, he came in and sat down and said, Corey wants to know what reunification with the kids would look like. And I was like, are you nuts? That's never going to happen. And so he went back and told Corey that. And so then Corey says, well, I want the dog. So the guy comes back in and says, well, he'll let you have the kids, but he wants the dog. And I was like, absolutely
No.
not. That's never going to happen. My dog was 100% a part of the abuse, and I'm not going to hand over my children or my dog to this abuser. It's never going to happen. So
Wow.
he ended up just saying, okay.
Well, if that isn't enough for now, because it's not like he's coming after you for defamation.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
So there's something to be said right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me some of the things that got you through that, some of the resources maybe, and, because there will be listeners who have also been through this or know someone who's been through this that will say, oh, I wish I would have known that I could have called this or gone here or,
Yeah. Well, I will say that, I appreciate and I'm thankful for the Harborview Sexual Assault Unit. I do personally, sitting here today, one thing that I want to do is I want to take a deep dive on what they offer. My memory tells me that they only were able to receive 12 to 13 sessions.
Counseling sessions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, going on their website, I see that, they say that they're individual based, but I do remember that there was like a cap. And again, it's probably funding based or whatever. However, walking through the rest of my journey, I feel like it really does need to be individually based. And not to compare like my trauma is worse than so-and-so's family or, none of that. But if you just look at what my children have said that they have been through, 13 counseling sessions, dear Lord God, is not enough, And then I will say it has been a hard journey to find the right fit for counselors. It's got to be, there's so many different components, the kids have to feel comfortable with whoever it is. It's hard for it to be a male. And, there's just a number of things. But I will say,
sometimes talk therapy is not the right fit either.
Right.
Sometimes it's equine therapy.
Yes. And I was going to touch on that.
Something else. You know what I mean? Like kids don't want to sit and talk about that shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe they just want to connect with an animal.
Yep. And they did do equine therapy, which was, good. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great until it wasn't. And I absolutely would speak highly of it. And I do.
Yeah.
But given our story of loss after loss after loss,
right.
My youngest, he connected with, I want to say 3 different horses that had to be put down over different times.
Gosh.
So then I was like,
no,
again,
that's really
in
hard.
the beginning, it was great.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it would have been, and it's great.
Yeah.
The majority of the time.
Oh. I'm so sorry.
But, and then there's the WISE team, which I walked through that with Sawyer and then now with Cash. And they have been great. I will say that being that it's a government funded program, it was definitely hard for them to have all 5 operating people on a team at once. And then the turnover rate, is hard. But some of those connections that we made several years ago, we still have today. And I think that's super important.
Really important.
Yeah. And then, like I said, I still have a handful or 2 of people that I grew up in the church with, that are still, solid people for me that I rely on. And then, of course, my mother is a big support for me. And then you have been here for me. I mean, I'll never forget going through my divorce. And I believe you reached out to me, sent me a message on Facebook, saying, what in the heck? Yeah.
I know I could have done more too, but I always feel kind of guilty about that. But at
No,
the same time,
no. You stepped up and you helped out in a big way. I mean, I always speak of that. I will speak that out even right now when I stepped away from my job. I mean, I could not have made it if it wasn't for you organizing gas cards and grocery cards and gift cards and putting Christmas together for my kids. I mean, that kept us going. You stepped up in a big way.
That was a lot of people.
Wow,
all I did was ask for help. And then a lot of people stepped in. But you know what? You need that.
Yeah.
And it's for the kids. The people that I asked for help knew that the kids needed it. And that's, the main thing. That's what it's all for,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If today's story moved or inspired you, please take a moment to share this episode with someone who needs a spark of courage. Your 5-star rating and short review help these brave, courageous, and resolutely fearless stories reach even more hearts. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an episode of Intrepid Storytelling. Thanks for listening.